There is a fear that elite athletes never admit publicly. Not the fear of losing. Every competitor has made peace with that. The fear of a specific name on the start list. The name that changes the feeling of a race before it has even begun. For an entire generation of quarter-milers and 200-metre specialists, that name was Michael Johnson. And what they described went beyond respect. It was terror. Michael Johnson won the 200 and 400-metre double at Atlanta 1996. No man had done it before. No man has done it since. He ran 19.32 seconds in the 200 metres. A world record the sport had no framework to process. The athletes who lined up beside him across a decade did not just lose to him, they described something else entirely. Number 5. Frank Fredericks. In Oslo in 1996, Fredericks ran 19.82 seconds to Johnson's 19.85. Johnson's 21-race winning streak ended. It was the last time anyone beat Michael Johnson in the 200 metres before Atlanta. Fredericks said afterward that winning produced a feeling he had not anticipated. Not pure satisfaction. Something more complicated, because the Oslo result confirmed only one thing, that on one specific day, by 0.03 of a second, the margin had gone the other way. 0.03, the distance between the greatest performance of Fredericks' career and a loss that would not have been close. What paralysed the field was not Johnson's times alone. It was the consistency behind them. Every other athlete in the 200 metres had bad days. Johnson appeared to have eliminated bad days entirely. He possessed a precision of preparation that even Fredericks, one of the most meticulous athletes in the event, found impossible to comprehend. Racing someone who does not have bad days is a different experience from racing someone who is simply very good. It removes every psychological possibility that the result might go differently. The only variable available is your own performance. And Johnson's consistency made clear that your own best was the ceiling, not the floor, of what the race required. Number 4, Roger Black. At the Atlanta Olympics in 1996, Black finished second to Johnson in the 400-metre final. He ran 40.41 seconds, a time that would have won gold at almost every previous Olympics in history. Johnson ran 43.49. The margin between them was nearly a full second. In a 400-metre Olympic final, a margin of nearly a full second is not a competitive result. It is a demonstration. Black said that standing on the podium in Atlanta, silver medal around his neck, having run the race of his career, he felt something he had never felt before. Not disappointment, not frustration, something quieter. The understanding that what he had witnessed from the adjacent lane did not exist in the same conversation as his own best efforts. The psychological toll of racing Johnson was unlike anything Black had experienced. Most athletes identify variables when preparing for a difficult opponent. The phase of the race where the gap might be smallest, the conditions that might favour them, the specific circumstances where the margin could be managed. With Johnson, there were no variables. The upright posture that should have been a weakness was not. The short stride that should have limited top-end speed did not. Every vulnerability the analysis suggested turned out to be something Johnson had already solved before the race began. Racing someone who has solved every problem you identified. That was the psychological toll Roger Black carried out of Atlanta. And he described it with the precision of a man who had stood on that podium and understood exactly what the silver medal meant. Number 3. Butch Reynolds. The man whose record Johnson took and whose era Johnson ended. Harry Butch Reynolds held the 400-metre world record before Michael Johnson. He ran 43.29 seconds at the 1988 Zurich Grand Prix and put a number on the board that the sport spent years treating as the outer limit of what the event could produce. Reynolds was not simply fast. He was the proof that the 400 metres had reached a new level of performance entirely. Then came the doping ban. Then came the return. and in the years that overlapped with Johnson's rise to complete dominance in the event, Reynolds competed in the shadow of a man who was redefining everything Reynolds had established as the standard. Reynolds said that what made Johnson terrifying was not just the times he ran, it was the way he ran them. The upright posture that coaches had spent decades telling athletes to move away from. Lower your centre of gravity, lean into the drive, reduce the wind resistance, Johnson had kept. Had built his entire technical approach around a style that violated the conventional teaching. And the times he produced from inside that style made the athletes who ran correctly look like they were competing in a slower version of the same event. Reynolds described watching Johnson in full flight as the closest thing to a mechanical process he had witnessed in a human runner. Not robotic, there was nothing mechanical about the smoothness of the execution, but systematic. The stride count between each section of the race, the management of the curve, the release into the final straight. All of it operated with a precision that suggested the race had been planned to the last detail and the body was executing the plan rather than responding to the competition. That quality, the sense that Johnson was racing his own plan rather than the race, was what made lining up beside him feel different from lining up beside any other competitor. Most athletes can be disrupted, can be pushed into a pace that is not theirs. Johnson could not be disrupted. He ran his race regardless of what the field was doing. And his race was faster than everyone else's. Number 2. Donovan Bailey. Donovan Bailey won the 100 metres at the Atlanta Olympics in world record time. He was the fastest man alive, and he knew it. Bailey carried a confidence that was not performative. It was earned, documented, and expressed with the directness of a man who had nothing to prove to anyone. When the conversation about who was truly the fastest man alive produced the 150-metre match race in Toronto in 1997, Bailey arrived believing the answer was obvious. The race ended with Johnson pulling up with an injured quad. Bailey waved him off, crossed the line alone, said publicly what his expression had already communicated, that the contest had not been close before the injury ended it. But in private, Bailey acknowledged something that the public swagger never fully expressed. That racing Johnson in the 200 metres, not the 150, not a fabricated distance designed to split the difference between their territories, produced a specific discomfort that he had not anticipated. The 200 metres in its second half is a sprint, full speed. Bailey's territory and Johnson's speed across that second 100 metres operated at a level that made Bailey's own top-end velocity feel, for the first time in his career, insufficient for the space it was occupying. Bailey never said Johnson was better. He would not have said that then, and the record does not require him to say it now. What he said was more honest than a ranking, that Johnson crossed into his territory and made it uncomfortable. That the fastest man alive had encountered someone who made fast feel like a relative term. Coming from Donovan Bailey, that admission meant everything. Number 1. The athletes themselves. The most honest testimony came not from any individual rival, but from the collective response of an entire generation of quarter-milers who competed against Johnson across his peak years. He was terrifying because he had solved the event in a way that nobody else had solved it. Because the technical approach that should have limited him had instead become his greatest weapon. Because the consistency he produced eliminated the psychological variables that competitors use to maintain belief in their own possibility of winning. Because the preparation he brought to every race communicated, from the moment he appeared at a starting line, that the result had already been decided and the race itself was the formality that confirmed it. Michael Marsh, his training partner at Santa Monica Track Club, described training alongside Johnson as the most educational and simultaneously most demoralizing experience of his athletic life. The education came from watching, at close range, the discipline and precision of a preparation that left no detail unaddressed. The demoralization came from understanding that the preparation was producing a gap that training could close, but never eliminate. Danny Everett, another training partner and fellow 400-meter specialist, said that the specific quality of Johnson's terrifying nature was its quietness. Johnson did not intimidate through presence or personality, or the performative confidence that some athletes use to establish psychological dominance before a race begins. He intimidated through competence, through the specific daily documented evidence of a preparation and execution that communicated more clearly than any verbal statement that the competition was operating at a different level from everyone around it. At the Atlanta Olympics, when Johnson crossed the finish line of the 200-meter final in 19.32 seconds, and the number appeared on the scoreboard, the reaction in the stadium was not the immediate roar that typically accompanies a world record. There was a moment, captured on the broadcast footage and described by every journalist present, of collective silence. A stadium of 80,000 people processing a number that did not fit inside any existing frame of reference for what a human being running 200 meters was supposed to produce. That silence was the most honest expression of what competing against Michael Johnson felt like, the moment when the performance exceeded the available language for describing it, when the frame of reference broke, and what remained was simply the number and the man who had produced it. Terrifying was the word the athletes used. It was the right word, because what Michael Johnson produced across a decade of competition was not just better than what his rivals were producing. It was better in a way that made the gap feel permanent. That made the result feel inevitable before the gun fired. That made the starting line feel, for everyone who stood beside him, less like the beginning of a competition and more like the beginning of a demonstration. He was terrifying because he had already won before the race began, and everyone who lined up beside him knew it.